In 1995, during the downfall of the Soviet Union, Susan Buck-Morse wrote on the disintegration of what she deemed the dream worlds of industrial modernity. In her view, the 20th century political ideologies that had pledged revolutionary transformation and claimed the mandate of the masses had in reality constructed untamed wild zones of arbitrary violent power, fundamentally unknowable to the general populace. Socialist, capitalist, and fascist utopias alike had blown apart, fragmenting historical conceptions of the world in their fallout. And yet her struggle to reckon with the wreckage of industrial modernity echoes voices of previous eras of global transition. In the wake of World War II, Jean-Paul Sartre compared the present to a labyrinth of hallways, doors, and stairways that lead nowhere, innumerable signposts that dot routes and signify nothing. In a world repeatedly traumatized by industrialized mass killing, chemical warfare, and nuclear decimation, the strains of culture that emerged telegraphed inescapable alienation and existential anguish. It is in this context of dystopian modernism that global noir and its recent appearance in Indonesian cinema is best understood. Far from being postmodern pastiche devoid of critical punch, Indonesian film noir uses noir form and style to channel a new generation's disillusionment with the corrupted dream world of post-authoritarian Indonesia. Cinema, rigidly controlled and used as a propaganda tool by the New Order regime, plays a crucial role in understanding the nation's transition from authoritarian regime to modern democracy. In the 1990s, the production of Indonesian films declined drastically due to a variety of causes. President Suharto's cronies monopolized film import and exhibition. Financial troubles led to a mass exodus of production company owners to TV, and repressive New Order censorship limited films to moralistic formulas. When Suharto finally stepped down in May 1998 after 30 years of New Order rule,
I have decided to declare that I cease being the President of the Republic of Indonesia.
the Indonesian film landscape tremored with euphoric Reformasi spirit.
It's more correct to look this not as an end of era, but a beginning of a different era. People feel confident in coming out criticizing, and people feeling confident in stating their views openly.
President Wahid officially abolished the Ministry of Information, and the Film Censor Board's authority waned. Newly released films exhibited a spitfire irreverence for old norms, abandoning formula in favor of stylistic experimentation. The post-1998 generation of Indonesian filmmakers consciously orient themselves to transnational images and affiliations, but the resurgence of state censorship since the mid-thousands has reinvigorated their role in political resistance.
Ideas have to be very, very big gitu loh. Yang bisa bergerak sekarang filmmakernya. Bukan masyarakat, bukan pemerintah, but we. Because we have the merchandise. We create.
There is a sense that a darker, older supervising power has remained throughout Indonesia's democratic transition, surveilling from the shadows. Despite the insistent veneer of freedom, New Order attitudes remain robust. Film noir is still new to Indonesia, having emerged in the late thousands with Joko Anwar's supernatural thrillers Kala and Pintu Terlarang and Upia Wianto's Belenggu. Innovative in their application of noir form and style, these films criticize pervasive governmental and societal corruption in contemporary Indonesia, and reflect ordinary people's feelings of alienation and fear provoked by institutional moral hypocrisy. Rather than envisioning Indonesian history as a predetermined and successful march toward greater civil liberty, they portray urban environments brewing with civil unrest, impotence, and repressed rage. Now, the term film noir likely conjures up certain classic archetypes. Dark alleys, Venetian blinds, and womanizing, wisecracking private eyes unraveling labyrinthine mysteries, slivers of redemption in a fatalistically cruel universe. These iconographic elements harken back to the original cycle of crime and detective films that arose in opposition to the saccharine fantasies of 1930s and 40s Hollywood classicism.
Popular films were melodramas, romances, musicals. the big song and dance.
Here's what film noir is to me. It's a righteous, generically American film movement that went from 1945 to 1958 and exposited one great theme, and that theme is your
It's the noir idea. We don't know what's going on, but we do know something bad is out there controlling events.
But despite its Hollywood-centric origins, noir has always contained the seeds of cinematic transnationalism. It emerged largely among French and German directors who fled from Europe's political nightmare during the time, only to face the reality of an American society similarly in a state of incoherence with its own rosy ideals. Noir is often therefore conceptualized as a mashup of German expressionism, French poetic realism, and American hard-boiled fiction. But there's no reason to think that the cultural exchanges stopped when these traditions came together in 1940s Los Angeles. Indonesian films noir feed off of a dynamism between Hollywood and Southeast Asian cinemas writ large.
My favorite place in this whole world before VHS are gone was VHS video store. I thought all movies were made in Indonesia. So if you want to make a Western film, Indonesian people have to be able to speak Western, English and stuff. Once I know that film got some people to make it, I want to be that maker.
Although they definitely wield homage as an international currency for critical acclaim, they also deploy Western noir conventions to challenge the dominant representations of their national reality. One trope all of these films seem to have in common is this figure of the emasculated male. The male protagonist of Kala is a narcoleptic journalist who passes out whenever he gets too excited, which renders him functionally impotent, both literally and metaphorically. Not only does his wife leave him because of his sexual deficiencies, but every time he tries to intervene to avert impending disaster, he is doomed to lose consciousness and fail. Symbolic castration is a prominent theme in The Forbidden Door as well. Gambier's sexuality is entirely controlled by the women in his life. His mother jokes about his impotence and constantly makes intimate prods about his sex life.
Dokter yang paling jago nanganin masalah ereksi, namanya Dr. Roni Anggono.
And his wife gets routine abortions while fooling around with his friends behind his back.
Ada istilah buat orang kayak kamu. Simpleton.
As the plot progresses, Gambier's lack of sexual agency develops into a pathological obsession with pregnancy, and he crafts scores of fetishistic pregnant sculptures, each of which conceal a real aborted fetus. Yeah. Upi Avianto's Belenggu takes a more subtle tack, but again the main character is a timid male figure driven berserk by patriarchal notions of masculinity. Femmes fatales disguised in situations of female victimhood manipulate him into being their fall guy by playing on his savior complex. By comparing the opening sequence with the final sequence, we can see how noir becomes a lens which projects how outdated paternalistic values warp Ilong's perceptions of himself and others. The first scene is actually a reversal of the noir classic Kiss Me Deadly's opening. In the original, Marion Carr's frightened character runs barefoot into the path of an oncoming car, only to draw the driver into a whirlpool of intrigue. In Belenggu, the dynamic is reversed to exacerbate Ilong's sense of powerlessness. He doesn't even choose to get in the car, but like Kala's narcoleptic protagonist, wakes up in the hands of opportunistic parties. In his mind's eye, he takes up the role of the doomed hitchhiker, while the two women drag him in to do their dirty work. Jinga plays the role of the classic Black Widow femme fatale, decked out in Hepburn-style headscarf, shades, and a cigarette. But by way of intertextual reference, she also occupies the traditional noir protagonist's seat of power, unsettling the patriarchal dynamics 1940s America took for granted. Both Ilang and Jinga share femme fatale and hard-boiled male protagonist characteristics. This serves to expose how regressive conceptions of gender and sexuality found in classical noir persist in contemporary Indonesian male imagination, but ultimately fail to encompass reality. Ilong's moral obligation to reclaim his paternalistic responsibility and avenge Jinga is precisely what makes him vulnerable to immoral manipulators. This anti-paternalistic thematic thread is part of what defines Indonesian noir. State paternalism was institutionalized by President Suharto, who claimed himself as the father figure ruling over the immature, infantilized nation, constantly in need of his guidance. Sexual politics provided a way to control the nation in the period of revolt. Therefore, reframing noir's historic misogyny as a corruptive cause of mental anguish in the main characters serves to criticize the post-authoritarian state's reliance on old patriarchal models. For instance, the recent rise of conservative political Islam in Indonesia has pushed censorship against groups labeled deviant in the name of morality.
This has nothing to do with freedom, but it has to do with being appropriate, with politeness not to disturb other people. So please, let's guard the morality of our nation.
Using noir archetypes to cast these characters' sexual dysfunctions as directly caused by moralistic repression reasserts resistance to the state's vision. Of course, by partaking in the noir tradition to supposedly reform the tastes of Indonesian audiences, the filmmakers themselves are enacting a form of paternalism. But ultimately, Indonesia's post-Reformasi film culture is in a stage of exploration. Global aesthetic references and transnational dialogue are not contradictory, but vital to reimagining the nation.